Hello, and welcome to my room. So, next on my list of the Beatles' US albums to review is the first from Capitol, 1964. Meet the Beatles, the first album by England's phenomenal pop combo. Don't you love that blurb there? So, yes, I did get the Beatles' US albums on vinyl. I didn't spring for the box set. I really don't need the Beatles story. Or do I? I don't know. But first off, just a brief review of the US albums from 1964. I hope they do the rest. But I really don't need Revolver, though. The UK Revolver is the one for me. But I do hope they do the rest. These things, every single one, was mastered loud, and they must have cleaned and vacuumed every single nook and cranny of the pressing plant, because there's not a pop. There is not a pop on these. The grooves are very big, not too much dead wax area. They really, I mean, if you have any of your original US albums, keep them for nostalgia. You want to get these. And not only that, you get a recreation of the original Capitol Records inserts, and a nice pamphlet here with liner notes done by Beatleologist Bruce Spicer. If you know anything about him, his books are must-haves, and he did the liner notes, and it gives me a new appreciation for the US albums, because as I got older, I wanted to hear them the way the Beatles and George Martin preferred. But it gives me a new appreciation, and it gives me a new extra added appreciation for Dave Dexter of Capitol Records. A man who rejected the Beatles initially, but once he accepted them, he did all he could to really sell them. And even though some might consider this, especially in the UK, a slapdash album, there was some thought put into the sequencing and everything involved in this album. You have, the single of I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I Saw Her Standing There, and the flip side, This Boy. And then it pretty much goes in order of the With the Beatles album, with the exception of the covers. The only cover that's on here is Till There Was You. He wanted to focus, per the liner notes, on the songwriting of this self-contained group. That's how he wanted to sell this, that these guys are songwriters as well. So with the exception of Till There Was You, that's the only cover on here. The rest are Lennon-McCartney and Harrison originals. So with the exception of the cover songs, it pretty much goes in order of With the Beatles. I Want to Hold Your Hand, and what a great start. I Saw Her Standing There, This Boy, It Won't Be Long, All I've Got to Do, All My Loving, a great end to side 1, Don't Bother Me, side 2, Little Child, Till There Was You, Hold Me Tight, I Want to Be Your Man, and Not a Second Time. It's a strong selection here, and it was a great way of introducing America to the Fab Four. So, for somebody for a long time, when I became a Beatle fan and when I discovered the UK editions, I became sort of like, the American albums don't mean nothing except nostalgia. That's how I heard them, that's how my dad heard them, etc., etc. I never realized that they really weren't, at least the ones in 1964 really were not a slapdash effort like I always thought they were. Dave Dexter really put some thought into this once they decided to go full in on the Beatles, and he knew how to sell them with this album. True, the tint is different than the UK edition of this album. They tinted it blue. But what an American debut. Hey guys, these guys not only rock out and have this weird hair, they also write their own songs. So he really sold them as a self-contained group with this album. And of course, I could just imagine being a teen in 1964, being my mom or my godfather, getting this for the first time and just being awestruck over this. So Meet the Beatles for the US album, it's a classic. The With the Beatles album, the official UK album, is a classic as well. But if you were around at the time, you could really understand why these guys took off in a big way. They had everything, the look and the songs. And Dave Dexter, dare I say it, sometimes you got to give the devil his due. I know people are always upset with the echo and stuff like that he added to certain songs, but got to give him his due. He knew what he was doing in retrospect. And yes, unlike the CD edition of the Beatles US albums, these are the US mixes in mono. So if there's a special mix for any of these songs, that's what they used. In fact, it tells you right here in the liner notes. Tracks 1 and 3 on side 1 are pure mono mixes. All the other tracks are fold-down mixes made by Capitol's Lee Minkler from the Stereo Masters on December 19th, 1963. So these are all in mono. And if it was a stereo fold-down mix, that's what you got. And that's what they put on here, the stereo fold-down mixes, which is a lot different than getting a stereo mix and hearing the duophonic when they got a mono. Long story there on how they got things earlier than they should have and all that stuff. I'm not going to get into all that. That's going to make my head ache. But Meet the Beatles from Capitol, the Beatles' first Capitol album, because VJ had Introducing the Beatles, which was a re-release of the full Please Please Me album from the UK. A classic. A classic. And you should have the UK and you should have the US. That's all I got to say about that. Thank you all for coming into my room today, and I'll see you next time.